Hi guys, in this Python video, we're going to be talking about while loops. Let's get on with it. While loops are similar to for loops because they can both be used to repeat code. However, with a for loop, you can say for definite how many times it will loop, because you're either putting the number of iterations into the range function, or you're looping through all of the items in a list, or all of the characters in a string. This is why for loops are an example of definite iteration. While loops, on the other hand, are an example of indefinite iteration, because the number of loops is not known when the loop starts. Instead, a while loop will stop looping when a certain condition is met. For example, a variable reaching a certain value, or the user entering a specific string. Let's look at some examples. Now, it is possible to make a while loop behave sort of like a for loop. Have a look at this. I'm going to create a simple for loop that prints hello 5 times. For I in range, print hello. Straightforward stuff. And now let's do the same thing using a while loop. Now the main difference with a while loop is that we need to create that counting variable ourselves. So I'm going to start by saying I equals 0. Now I'm going to set up a while loop that says while I is less than 5, print hello. Now this is the important bit. We have to increment that counting variable each time. If we don't increase the value of that counting variable, then the loop will never end, and an infinite loop will cause your program to hang and become unresponsive. Not good. So now if I run this, we can see we get exactly the same output. So this achieves the same thing as the for loop example, just with a slightly different approach. Now let's look at another way that we can use while loops. This next example uses a different condition. We're going to look at how to use a while loop to create a simple password authentication program. So we'll start by creating a variable called password, and in there I'm going to store some text from the user. So the user will type in their password and it will be stored in that variable. Now let's create our while loop. I'm going to say while password is not equal to let me in. So if the user has typed anything other than let me in, this code is going to run. And what I'm going to do is first of all print a message saying incorrect password. But then what I'm going to do is take this first line of code where the user is typing in a password and repeat it. So within the while loop, they're now asked again to input their password. And if they get it wrong again, it will keep asking them again and again and again, until eventually they type in the correct password, the while loop will exit, and this line of code will run. So let's put access granted. So we'll run it, enter your password. If I keep typing in the wrong passwords, it just says incorrect, incorrect, incorrect. But as soon as I type in the correct password, the condition for the while loop will no longer be true, the while loop will exit, and it will say access granted. So there you go, a simple password authentication algorithm using a while loop. Now let's try combining these two different while loops that I've shown you to create a password authentication algorithm that only allows the user 3 attempts. So let's start from scratch. I want a variable that keeps track of the number of attempts. I'm going to set that to 0. This time, instead of asking the user to type in a password straight away, I'm just going to store an empty string. That way, when I create my while loop that says while password not equal to let me in, I know that the while loop is going to run at least once. I know that password is not let me in. The first thing I'm going to do is check to see whether they've reached the maximum number of attempts. So if attempt is less than 3, so they haven't reached their maximum number of attempts yet, they're allowed another go, let's ask them to enter their password. And if the user's just typed in the password, it means they've had an attempt, and we need to increment the attempts variable. Because remember, we need to keep track of the number of attempts that they've had. But what if they have reached the maximum number of attempts? In which case we need an else statement. And what I'm going to do is print a message saying something like you have run out of attempts. And then I'll just use the inbuilt Python quit function just to terminate the program. However, if the user does type in the correct password within those 3 attempts, the while loop will exit and the final line of the program will run. Access granted. So now let's test this. Let's start by typing in 3 incorrect passwords. It should print you've run out of attempts and quit. Now let's test it again. Let's type in 2 incorrect passwords. But finally, let's enter the correct password and you'll see that the for loop exits and it prints access granted. And now you understand a little bit more about how to work with while loops in Python. See you next time.